Hi, welcome to this session of political science. This is chapter 1 in your textbook, and the title of the chapter is Challenges of Nation Building. Let's quickly start off by looking at the learning objectives and the importance of this chapter. There are 3 learning objectives of this chapter. Number 1, what was the context in which India gained freedom and what were the accompanying challenges? Number 2, what were the ways in which the challenge of integration as one single nation, how was it achieved? How challenging was it? And lastly, the reorganization of states based on language as the criteria. It's a very easy chapter, very interesting, and the best of it is that this chapter you will get 5 to 7 questions, which is almost 10% weightage in your exam. Good to go? Come, let's go. And let me start by giving you something very exciting. I'm sure all of us love watching movies. Here are 3 movies that I'm recommending for you to understand this chapter in a more exciting way, to develop more insights. 1, a movie called Garam Hawa that came in 1973, a very celebrated Hindi movie. Number 2, an equally successful, very painful, it captured the emotions very beautifully, a telefilm called Tamas that came in 1982-83 by Govind Nihalani. And of course, Richard Attenborough's Gandhi. When you find time, go to Netflix or YouTube and watch these. It will help you understand from different perspectives the same story. Okay? Alright. India became independent, as you know, on the 14th, 15th night of August 1947, and the first event that happened was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's speech in Parliament, which goes by the title of Tryst with Destiny. It is one of the celebrated speeches of independent India. A good question could come from this, okay? Who spoke Tryst with Destiny? Or what is the title of the speech? What is the title of the speech given by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru? Okay. Now, one of the things that featured India at the time of independence was that there were many voices, there were many perspectives, many perhaps is an understatement, lot of disagreements. But 2 things everybody was very clear about, and there was no contention. 1, that we want to become a democratic country where everybody has the same say. Number 2, as a society, as an independent nation writing our own future, we must focus on uplifting the poor and the socially backward people. Every single leader was unanimous on these 2 things, democracy and poor and socially backward people. In that context, India faced 3 challenges. Number 1 is about integration. How do we progress forward wherein we retain the diversity, we celebrate diversity, but we continue to remain united? Because remember, India had just begun to experience the pains of partition. It was a very painful experience for the entire country. So that was challenge number 1. And this chapter, we are going to focus singularly on this part. Number 2 and number 3, we will cover in other chapters, but here just to mention, the second challenge was, how do we make democracy work? Even the oldest democracy and the more mature societies, so-called, weren't like India. They weren't as diverse. India had 33 crore population at the time of independence. It's not a joke. So, democracy banana to aasan hai. Constitution has been adopted, fundamental rights have been given, directive principles have been formed. All of these are stuff to be done on paper. But how do you make it work on the ground? That's a very, very big challenge. Challenge number 2. Challenge number 3, which India is still in the process of successfully coming out of it, victorious, which is how do you create social equality? How do you eliminate poverty? How do you get the socially backward and the oppressed people to have a say, to get education, to be successful? That ideal is still a work in progress. So these were the 3 challenges for us. As we move into this core of this chapter, we are going to focus on challenge number 1, which is what were the immediate challenges after partition, and then how did we integrate all of these into one nation. Shall we move forward? Good. Take a look at what happened. Take a look at the map of India. You know, the Britishers, when they were going away, they were in a hurry to go away. They had their own challenges post World War II. And then, whoever were making decisions, उन्होंने कहा कि मुसलमानों को अलग कंट्री देना है, तो उन्होंने देखा तो पाया कि वेस्टर्न एज ऑफ द Indian subcontinent, there was a lot of Muslim majority geographies in Punjab. Similarly, Bengal had massive Muslim majority. So these intellectuals or the powers who were making decisions at that point in time, they said, we are going to give Pakistan in 2 different parts of India. It's just not that you and I are half unwise, even people like that. Imagine how challenging that is to have 2 countries separated apart by thousands of kilometers. But that's what happened. So, West Pakistan and East Pakistan took birth. What happened within that? People didn't have time. There was no division, there was no time. All of a sudden on 14th August, people didn't even know that my home that I'm living in is going to be in East Pakistan or West Pakistan. They didn't know. And overnight, the transition happened. And what it created was one of the most bloodiest transfer of human beings in the history of mankind. About 80 lakh people migrated either from West Pakistan to West Punjab to East Punjab, which is Indian part of Punjab. All the Hindus and Sikhs and Jains, etc., they had to come on this side. Indian Muslims choose to go on that side. Same thing happened on the eastern border of India, where East Pakistan was taking place. And it was chaos. It was chaos. It led to social tensions. Soon there were violences, killings, brutalities. Women were raped, children were killed, and in order to save the family honor, people killed their own wives and daughters so that they are not violated. All of these happened. Trainfuls arrived in different parts of on both sides of the border with charred bodies. It was extremely painful experience out of which, at the end of which, it is estimated that anywhere between 6 to 8 lakh people died. That was the challenge of partition. But did it solve the problem? No. Because even at the end of it, India still had Muslims who did not want to leave and go to Pakistan, because they were living in places like Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, etc. So 12% of Indians were still Muslims. Did it solve problems for Hindus, etc. in Bangladesh or East Pakistan or West Pakistan? No. And these minorities, they have felt trapped, and they were the hapless victims of this partition that was imposed upon us, our society at that point in time. So what did India do? India did not take a view that since all Muslims were to go away, we should become a Hindu society. No, that they did not make that choice with all their wisdom, because there were other minorities as well. Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, Parsis. So India chose to stay secular and say that irrespective of your age, creed, caste, religion, you are an Indian and you get exactly the same rights as any other Indian in this country. This was how the first phase of Indian partition, howsoever painful it was, that got settled. And it is very unfortunate, but the fact remains that Mahatma Gandhi had to give the ultimate sacrifice a human being can give. And it is said that quite literally, it is at the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi ji and immediately later that people reconciled and the partition, coexistence, etc. began to settle in the minds and hearts of people. I hope it helps you understand the context in which the Indian independence happened and the challenges that we faced as a society. Take a look at these questions and answer them quickly before I move to the second part of the chapter. Okay, quick questions, 10 seconds each is good enough. Let's move forward. The next part of the challenge that India was facing was very interesting, very interesting, very fascinating. The number of states, princely states, at that time, which were governed by various kings and princes, there were 565 of them in India. In addition to that, there were some of these provinces which were directly ruled by the Britishers. So, a prince like Gwalior state, Hyderabad, Junagadh, Baroda, Travancore, many of these were ruled by a king or a prince or a Nizam, and he had absolute rights, authority over his people, as long as he said, the Queen of England is my boss. Okay, so he would give some taxes, he would do this, he would do that, but he would run his geography like an authoritarian ruler. In that context, what Britishers said was, when they were leaving in a hurry, that okay guys, we are leaving, but whether you want to be an independent state of Hyderabad or Junagadh or Kashmir, or you want to join Pakistan, or you want to join India, we would leave it to you. That created chaos. And that's when our deputy prime minister at that point in time, the Iron Man, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, he was also the home minister, he stepped up and played an historic role in the integration of all of this into one union. Okay, what happened? They said that the Indian government said that we are going to be firm with these guys and they have to sign and join the Indian Union. There could be some concessions given to some rulers, but two things were completely non-negotiable, and this includes Travancore. He was the first person to declare independence, the king of Travancore, the current Kerala. Hyderabad Nizam. They said that, one, you have to step aside and let the people become part of the democratic process. So your non-democratic approach will not be allowed. That was an important precondition. Number two, along with the desire of the people, autonomy and delegations and integrations into administration into Indian Union was non-negotiable. If you are against these two, we will come. We will come and we'll take over forcibly. Fortunately, almost all of them, except about half a dozen of them, let's say, they all signed what we call as instrument of accession. agreement sign करके देना कि now I am Gwalior state, I am Jaipur state, I am Jodhpur state, you give me these things, allow me to keep my palace, allow me to keep my servants, you give me some princely sum, etc., some negotiations for me, rest they gave up. There were a few who fought tooth and nail, and that is something that we will cover. The most, celebrated, noted was the Nizam of Hyderabad. Did you know that Nizam of Hyderabad at that time was the richest man on the face of the earth? This is a very interesting case study or an anecdote. He went to the showroom of a very noted automobile company in London, and the way he dresses himself, people were disrespectful to him, and then they asked him to go out of the showroom. And he was the Nizam of Hyderabad. He ordered half a dozen of those brands. Go and look up which company brand I'm talking about, and got them to come to Hyderabad, and he made those, at that time, the most expensive cars in the world to lift stuff from the dustbins in the morning as garbage trucks. And the photographs were taken. You will find it on the internet today also if you go and look at it. I'm talking about Rolls-Royce. Okay? This rich man, he said that I want to be independent, and he's even negotiated with the Indian government saying that give me time for a year, I'll decide in a year, and that agreement was called the standstill agreement. But the peasantry, the farmers, the lower sections of the society were against the Nizam, and that movement took birth. The poets, the social activists, the Communist Party people, they all joined them, and it became what was called as a Razakar movement in Hyderabad. And the Nizam's paramilitary forces, the official machinery, they clamped down on the people, and a lot of atrocities were committed on them. Indian government took charge of the situation, sent in the army, and it's only after the Indian army came onto the scene did the Nizam relent and signed on the instrument of accession. If that was the case of Hyderabad, another case that is mentioned in your book is that of Manipur. The king of Manipur, Bodhachandra Singh, he resisted, but after a little bit of a negotiation, he relented with one guarantee that it will be given, Manipur will be given autonomy. And Manipur, incidentally, was the first state that went into elections in 1948. Then what happened was that in the Legislative Assembly, all the Congress members, MLAs as we call them, the MLAs from Congress, they raised the issue that Manipur should be integrated into the Indian Union, whereas the MLAs from other parties opposed it. But soon the matter got settled because people rose and in large numbers in support of integration into the Indian Union. That resulted in Manipur becoming part of India in September 1949. That brings me to the last part of this chapter before we close, which is reorganization of states. So, the initial partition, migration challenges we've covered, the integration of the princely states we have covered, and then as India moved into the 50s, the other significant challenge in our emergence of a single union came by saying, how do we manage such a large country? And the way it was organized in the British period was they simply had administrative divisions. Madras Presidency covered most of present-day Tamil Nadu, little bit of Kerala, large parts of Karnataka, entire Andhra Pradesh, even part of Maharashtra. So it was very haphazard, and it came out for a different set of reasons whenever that happened. Madras Presidency, Travancore, Bombay Presidency, Calcutta Presidency and all. Now you needed to have something which is more logical, which is more sustainable. So what India went through at that point in time is very interesting, and you must pay attention to this. As you know, there are these different very important languages that are spoken in different parts of India. So the debate that started off was, can we reorganize our geography by using language as an important criteria, which later on became known as linguistic division of states. Okay? But there was this dilemma, there was this fear, saying कहीं ऐसा तो नहीं है हम एक और गलती दोबारा करने वाले हैं, क्योंकि हमने रिलीजन के ऊपर किया था, and you know the market that happened. Is it likely to happen now? There was a lot of dilemma, a lot of discussions. But eventually it found its own way, and the first movement started in Tamil Nadu. Because in the Madras state presidency, there was this large population in the northern part of that Madras presidency were all Telugu speaking people, and they wanted their own identity. And they came up with what was called as the Vishal Andhra movement. And while the agitation was on, one of the leaders by name Putti Sri Ramulu, he was a very tall, statured Congress leader even before independence. He had fought against the British right from the 1920s with other tall leaders of the Congress. So Putti Sri Ramulu led this movement for separate Andhra state, and he was a Gandhian. He went on fast. Unfortunately, the government did not act quick enough, and after 56 days of fasting, Putti Sri Ramulu died, and that caused chaos. The outcome of it was that the government had to relent. They split Madras state into Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. That led to the demands for doing the same in different parts of India, which led in 1953. So Andhra and Tamil Nadu, this happened in 1952. So in 1953, at the parliament, they had to set up the State Reorganization Committee, and then that went in, came back with proposals, came back with recommendations, which led to the creation of 14 states and 6 union territories. Take a look at the graph, take a look at the map. So Marathi speaking Maharashtra, Kannada speaking Karnataka, Gujarati speaking Gujarat, all of those happened. And even now the process is not complete. Much later, Punjab came into existence, Haryana, Himachal, etc. Later on, much later on, 30, 40 years later, other criterion were also used for separation or reorganization of states, which led to Uttarakhand, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, etc. happening in order to improve the administrative efficiency of the states. So, all in all, in the reorganization of states, some 2-3 things happened that are very important if we look back. Number one, the fear that if we reorganize it using language, the fear was found to be misplaced. ऐसा कुछ हुआ नहीं, बल्कि यहाँ तक भी आर्ग्यू किया जा सकता है कि perhaps डेमोक्रेसी का डीप रूटेडनेस का ये एक बहुत अहम स्टेप था. बिकॉज इफ यू गिव ईच language and culture and region to have an expression of its own, you are deepening the roots of democracy. So that is one thing that happened. Number two, this also gave a little bit of an algorithm for India to organize itself over the next 30-40 years. एक अच्छा क्या कहते हैं नुस्खा मिल गया था, एक अच्छा फॉर्मूला मिल गया था. हालांकि गलती से या अनफॉर्चुनेट पोटी श्री रामुलु जी के पासिंग अवे से उसके बावजूद भी this was a very good breakthrough for India. Lastly, it can be argued that it actually ended up strengthening us as a country. There are not many countries in the world, including Western Europe. अगर आप स्विट्जरलैंड में देख लें, जर्मनी में देख लें, ऑस्ट्रिया में देख लें, यूके में देख लें, you know this Scotland versus Ireland versus British, they are not as synergistic as you find in India. Language and culture is more fundamental than religion. And these things, the ancient wisdom of our culture, of our society, that wisdom came to the fore in dealing, while India was dealing with some of these challenges, which was unique and thrown at us with no precedence. That brings me to the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to meet you again in the next chapter. There are a few questions that are here. Take some of those questions, answer them, and don't forget, MCQ है. आप कॉमन सेंस यूज कर सकते हो अगर गलती से याद नहीं आ रहा है. MCQ है तो आप एलिमिनेशन ऑफ चॉइसेस कर सकते हो. Don't leave it without attempting. Okay? Have a good day. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did bringing it to you. Take care. Bye-bye.